The AI for Good Global Summit, convened by ITU, recognizes the joint responsibility of governments, the private sector, United Nations agencies, academia, and others to ensure AI reaches its full potential while preventing and mitigating harms.
And it's a moment that calls for action. And today I'm calling on each of you to use this summit to help the world to better understand what kinds of regulations, what kinds of guardrails we need to put in place right now. So together, let's make it innovative, let's make it safe, and let's make it responsible for all. Thank you very much.
Welcome to AI for Good, the leading action-oriented, global and inclusive United Nations platform on AI. Organized by ITU, in partnership with 40 UN sister organizations, and co-convened with Switzerland. The goal of AI for Good is to identify practical applications of AI to advance the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and scale those solutions for global impact. In today's session, we're counting on you to use the live video wall feature to ask questions and post comments to help create an engaging discussion. We encourage you to stay until the end to chat, connect, ask questions, and network with our distinguished panelists and world-class AI experts in the neural network. It is now time to kick off the session and welcome our first speaker. The floor.
Good afternoon, good morning. Welcome to the AI and Work series, which is part of the ITU's AI for Good series in partnership with the ILO. I'm Janine Berg, and I'm Senior Economist in the Research Department of the International Labor Organization. We know from ILO research that most of the changes from AI in the world of work will be in transforming work, changing jobs. There might be some job elimination, but the biggest changes really are how those jobs are going to be changed. And this is something that can be managed. It's not automatic. It's the result of decisions taken by employers, the decisions taken by workers and workers' organizations on how this change takes place. So we're thrilled to have with us today Professor Virginia Doellgast to discuss the research she's been doing on how AI affects job quality, how this process can be managed, and how different industrial relations systems provide the context for this change. Professor Virginia Doellgast is the Ann Evans Estabrook Professor of Employment Relations and Dispute Resolution in the ILR School at Cornell University. Her research focuses on the comparative political economy of labor markets and labor unions, inequality, precarity, and democracy at work. She is the author of Exit, Voice, and Solidarity from Oxford University Press and Disintegrating Democracy at Work from Cornell University Press in 2012. She's also co-editor of International Comparative Employment Relations and Reconstructing Solidarity. She is the co-editor of the ILR Review and president for the Society for the Advancement of Socioeconomics, SASE. So we're pleased to have with her today so she can tell us about the research she's been doing in this area. And the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Janine. I'm going to put my slides up now and hope that all works with the technology as I'm presenting on technology. All right, so you should be able to see this now. Yes?
Hi,
Good.
Virginia. We can, but it seems to be in quite a small frame.
Oh, okay. Is that better?
There's no way that you can make it. There we go. That's perfect. Thanks, Virginia.
Okay. All right. So thank you so much for inviting me. I've been studying digitalization and AI in the information and communications technology industry over the past 5 years. So this presentation summarizes some of the findings from this research. And broadly, I'm interested in understanding why new digital and AI-based tools are used differently across similar kinds of jobs. What explains the choices managers make, and under what conditions will they use these tools in a way that supports good jobs with mutual gains for workers, companies, and society? So my theme is very much in line with the theme of this webinar series. I have a particular interest in the role of worker voice in shaping these decisions. So where are unions and works councils or other worker representatives able to participate meaningfully in decisions about how these tools are used? And what are the outcomes where workers do have real voice in decision making? So first, it's important to set out what is digitalization and AI, what is new and not so new about these technologies. Digitalization itself has been around for a while. So I've been studying restructuring in the telecom industry since the early 2000s when I first did my PhD research in Germany and the US. And at that time, this industry was at the center of the first digital revolution. This was organized around the microprocessor, and then the internet and mobile telephone. And these technologies gave companies new tools to digitalize a lot of things that used to be done on paper or face-to-face. So this is not necessarily a new thing to think about the impact of digital technologies. However, we're now in the center of the second wave, or the second digital revolution, based on even faster internet speeds, cloud-based data storage, and artificial intelligence, with recent advances, of course, that we all hear a lot about in autonomous or generative AI, like ChatGPT, DALL-E, and GitHub Copilot. And all of these kinds of tools are providing new opportunities and new abilities for companies to restructure work. So certainly, there's a lot that's new about these tools. But if you look at how they're being used to restructure work, the trends are not so different from what happened during the first digital revolution, or what I was studying in my research over the course of early 2000s into the 2010s. So this is my book, which is based on research of roughly between 2010 and 2015 in large telecom firms like AT&T, Deutsche Telekom, France Telecom. And across these cases, I found that labor unions and works councils were having really different outcomes or success in using worker voice to shape how technologies were being used and what impact they had on work and employment. And I focused on these three areas: downsizing, or through automation, performance management, so new ways of using performance monitoring tools, and fissuring through moving work outside of companies into temp agencies and subcontractors. And all of these first digital revolution technologies I was just talking about were really central to this wave of restructuring and these kinds of basically restructuring decisions, which had a big impact on worker outcomes. So in my more recent research, I'm finding that conflicts and choices around AI are actually very similar to those from the first digital revolution. So these three categories really map onto those from the earlier slide. First, if you think about that downsizing category, that's really about labor replacing. So we've heard a lot in the press about whether there's going to be automation or there's going to be augmentation. This is this basic question about how these AI-based tools are used to automate jobs and tasks or to augment skills. There's also the second point. I was studying performance monitoring. The new kind of performance monitoring and management tools are algorithmic management tools. And here the question is whether these are used in a more of a labor controlling way to intensify control, to sort of take voice and power away from workers, or to empower them to make decisions or to have more control over their schedules and over training and skills development. And then a third category maps onto this concern with outsourcing, offshoring, or fissuring, right? AI can also be used in labor displacing ways, where you have work being moved outside of organizations or fissuring, but they can also be used in ways that are embedding work to create good jobs with more social protections. So, and as a short preview to my answer of what conditions we have one or the other. I'm going to be arguing that these tools can be used in ways that result in both the good and the bad outcomes highlighted here, but that worker voice can make a crucial difference. So that's a very short punchline that I will now develop over a lot of slides. So a brief summary of my research. Again, I've been studying telecom jobs for a long time, and I've continued to look at these trends as AI becomes the new tool, the new restructuring kind of push. And most of my work has looked at call centers in North America and Europe, but I've also been looking at ICT services and consulting, and more recently, game development. And with Sean O'Brady, we did a survey of unionized call center workers in the US and Canada. So I'll be reporting on some of the findings here. So in the rest of the presentation, I'm going to first go over how AI-based technologies are used, focusing on this example of call centers, because I know it best and because there are a lot of AI applications. And then I'll look at worker experiences with these technologies based on our survey. And then finally, I'll give an example of how works councils in Germany have really used worker voice in AI decisions in these kinds of workplaces to try to encourage more mutual gains. Okay, so first, labor replacing or complementing. This is where I get into some of the nerdy details of exactly how these tools are being used. You all probably have had experiences with chatbots or voice bots, right? This is something that is now a kind of universal thing that has been around for a while. You're increasingly having generative AI being used, being layered on top of these more traditional kinds of simple answers being given to questions, where these different tools are able to learn over time and provide better answers or more nuanced answers. So this means that more calls are being shifted to chatbots and voice bots. And this is happening at the same time as there's increasing self-service. So this is sort of facilitating a further shift away from the use of workers to answer these calls. So there you can see it's possibly a clear labor replacing tool. You also have intelligent call routing. So you've always had calls being routed to agents. Increasingly, you as a customer don't have to say why you're calling. The AI in the background is predicting why you are calling and who you should be routed to, which agents are best able to perhaps handle your call or concern. So for example, if you've recently gotten a bill, they may push you quickly to get an answer on bills because they predict that you might have that kind of question. Or if certain agents have been really good at selling things to certain kinds of customers, they might route you as a customer to that particular agent. So these tools are getting better at this kind of matching process. You also have end-to-end diagnostics, where agents are able to help find and fix network or equipment faults by basically using the AI tools to lead them through a series of steps. And so this allows more call center agents to handle more complicated kind of work that technicians used to be able to do. And then you have agent assistant tools. So think of this as a chatbot for the agent. And indeed, they use a lot of the same tools and indeed the same technologies and answers. So you have these integrated systems that often can do a lot of these things at once. Basically, the agent has their own little chatbot that's helping them to find product or customer information during the calls or chats. It's sort of simplifying search and form filling and following up sometimes automatically with customers, right? So here's one example, Sophie AI, where you see you have chatbots that are increasingly voice bots that are these kind of virtual agents that are helping to guide you through. But at the same time, those same tools here are doing agent assist. So that it's not just a co-pilot, it's really guiding the agent themselves and helping them to basically take action. And then here's this visual platform for the human agent to collect data, to turn calls into videos, to really do a lot more. So you can see here that these tools might have both a labor replacing and an augmenting or complementing role. Then you have another set of tools that are more about the performance management. So they're not just tools to help you in your work, or that might be replacing human work, but they're actually helping to automate some of the process of managing the workers doing that work. There's a whole range of workforce management, algorithmic management tools with predictive analytics, which can be used to hire, to evaluate performance, determine training needs, and actually deliver that training, and do the work of a manager, allocating work or scheduling hours and breaks. You also have AI-enabled monitoring, which scans the workspace of an agent. So increasingly, call center workers are maybe working at home, either part of the time or all of the time. And these monitoring tools will use cameras to then be constantly scanning the workspace. And if there's a child or if there's something on the desk, it will alert the manager and ding the employee. There's also automated coaching and feedback tools, and this is what we heard the most about and is probably the most contentious within the call center environment. These use speech analytics and data analytics to basically give feedback to agents based on patterns in their performance by basically mining all the data from all their calls and flagging any problems that are consistent or perhaps that are anomalous, but of course can be then also used to dock their pay or to recommend coaching. One of the most kind of interesting sets of tools are these ones that are doing sentiment analysis. And I believe under the AI Act, this is now the kind of thing that is not permitted in the EU. But Cogito and these other sentiment analysis kinds of tools are giving agents real-time AI-driven coaching on things like the tone of their voice, whether they're following the script. So if you see here, this is Cogito's advertising. And of course, this is just one of many tools like this, but they were one of the industry leader. You see here on the bottom left, you get a little energy cue or positive interaction or a cue telling you that you need to express more empathy in your discussion. And you see here how they're describing the way that these tools are combining a lot of different forms of AI, emotion AI, conversation AI, generative AI. I was talking about these tools with a colleague who's a computer scientist, and he was very surprised that sentiment analysis was used so widely in call centers because he said this is one of the kinds of tools that are earliest in development. And certainly a lot of the employees and union representatives I talked to felt that that was very much the case, right? These tools don't always work as they are advertised. So then this third part, right, or this third set of impacts is the labor displacing or embedding impact. And here I think it's a little bit early to say what exactly is going on with the way companies are restructuring work across place or across organizational boundaries. Certainly the shift to work from home has been enabled by AI-based tools like monitoring technologies and video chats, different kinds of algorithmic management. So you have a wide shift, contact center workers. When I was doing interviews in Germany around the pandemic, there were 80% of all subcontracted call center workers had been shifted to work from home, and companies were closing offices and trying to move everybody there. And a lot of the US telecom firms have also closed their offices, moved large chunks of their workforce to these permanent work from home contracts. So that's a big shift just in the location of work. And we heard from workers that might be the first step there's this kind of fear that, well, now they can just shift it to subcontractors and we don't necessarily know what they're doing with that work across places. What's to stop them from moving more of those jobs to another country if they can be managed remotely in this way? There's also different models of crowdsourcing, the idea of call centers. I have a little Again, image up here from a company that advertises, basically, we can do all your marketing for you. And the way that they often do that is just having an outsourced digital marketing team, which might be a lot of people in their home, located in different places. And then, of course, you have across the development of these AI tools, a whole value chain that has implications for where work is happening and under what conditions, right? This book I'm reading right now, Feeding the Machine, is great. I recommend it to everyone. And it's really looking at who are the people who are doing this AI work across the value chain in places in Africa and Kenya and around the world. Right. So these are the kind of broad choices. Now for a little bit of data. So we did a survey of call center workers in the US and Canada. These are just some results from our US survey. And as you see, we asked agents about a series of different kinds of applications of AI. So we were saying, is AI or algorithm-based tools are they being used in your workplace to do these different things, to route calls, to agents, to help find or fix network or equipment faults, to help find product or customer information, all the things that I was just presenting to you. And we then are dividing those answers up into this labor replacing, complementing, and the labor controlling, empowering buckets. And you see that these are basically the percent of people who say, if they know, that it's yes, not no, across these different tools. And across the different respondents, we did see a majority, but not everyone. So this shows that either employees are not always aware that these tools are in place, or that there's some variation across companies in their use. Then we asked a series of questions where we said, well, can you talk about the technology that's had the biggest impact and why? What has been the impact on your work? And through these qualitative answers, but also through the many interviews that we've done, we found that there are really contradictory effects, right? There's some labor replacing and some complementing going on. So employees did report that there's more diversity, complexity, and variety. Certainly tools to do the job better, where they feel like there's some ability to provide better customer service. And we found a lot of agents and union representatives were really focused on pushing back against companies' cost-cutting pressure to wrap up quickly, to try to resolve these questions by customers without really resolving them. And so they felt like some of these tools could help them to do the job better in a way. And that gave them a lot of satisfaction. But at the same time, there was more time pressure. There was more time interacting with customers because the simpler calls are being taken away. And so it makes it more difficult for them. They have to handle these more complicated calls. And there's less downtime, as these tools are much better at intensifying work and making sure you're going from one call to the other. And if you're good at calls, you might get more of them, right? There are also, as anyone who's interacted with technologies know, a lot of system bugs and angry customers connected to that. And that also makes work stressful for these agents who want to ultimately satisfy customers or resolve their problems. And then, of course, job cuts. This was a constant fear, and we did have questions in our survey about this and had found an increase in fears that technologies were going to replace jobs, and that outsourcing and offshoring continued to be a major threat. A majority felt like this was going to lead, these technologies and outsourcing and offshoring were going to lead to job cuts in the next few years. Then on the impact of these more algorithmic management tools, we again found here more negative than positive. So there was data privacy issues, intensified monitoring connected to recording these calls, and decisions were being removed from humans. So there was less ability to contest or grieve unfair decisions, and a lot of concern with just potential discrimination, particularly these sentiment analysis tools and how they were picking up the voices of different agents and maybe misclassifying based on your gender or race, whether you were speaking with pep or in a friendly way to customers. On the more positive side, some agents and as well as union representatives talked about better, more tailored training and coaching and scheduling, and possibly more fair versus more biased kinds of uses of these tools. Right. So here's one quote saying that this takes the ability of the manager to use favoritism out of the way. Right. So you can see if you have a computer making the decisions or this AI tool making the decisions, you could have some fairness benefits. What we found when we then asked each person who said, yes, this tool is used, we asked a series of questions about how it's used. And what are the impacts? So does it make employees work faster? Does it make work easier, more stressful, more interesting, or improve customer service? And if you see here in the charts, the yellow, the orange, means that they strongly disagree or disagree. The blue is they're neutral, neither agree nor disagree. And the purple is that they agree or strongly agree. So what this shows is that these AI tools that are, you say, the potentially labor augmenting here or complementing generally have more positive views, but employees are still very divided. So, here 33% disagreeing that they make employees work faster and 33% agreeing. Certainly, but some positive results, right? 54% thinking that there is some improvement in customer service. On the other hand, we had more negative responses for these questions about the more labor controlling, emphasizing that they were more often used in this kind of controlling rather than empowering way, except for the question about training and development, where there was more positive feeling about what these were doing. But here you see, a large percentage of workers feel that these automated coaching tools are making work more stressful, and certainly they're not making decisions more fair or improving customer service. Although, look at the purple, there are some places where these tools are maybe being used in more of an empowering way. So that raises this question, well, so under what conditions do you have one or the other? Do you get more to the positive outcomes or the negative outcomes? And here, I have an article that's cited very small at the bottom, where I'm arguing that you have a great potential for mutual gains from these technologies. You have coalitions between workers and customers or service users, particularly in these service workplaces, a shared interest in the technology's impact on service quality, and a real thirst to find solutions to use this AI in a way that really enhances service quality, that's making outcomes better for both the customers and for the firm. A second kind of dynamic is there's a lot of research also in organizational behavior, management studies that have shown that worker knowledge and skills are important inputs and outputs of AI-based technologies, with collaboration really important between workers and these tools to improve their performance over time. At the same time, in a lot of my interviews in the US, not only for call center jobs, but also for more high-skilled IT technical work, you see that there's a lot of pressure on firms to cut costs and find ways to automate and rationalize work. So in order to get some of these benefits, you really need more productive constraints on firms. And here's why I'm interested in the role of these bargaining or rights or worker voice and legislation that's protecting minimum standards, worker privacy, and control over data. So my time is running short. I'm just going to quickly give some examples. These kinds of laws, as well as collective agreements, are increasingly in the public eye, and there's been a lot of attention at the national and the industry or company level. I'm just going to give an example from Germany, where I've done a lot of research. I spent a year there studying how companies were responding to AI around 2021, 22. And important to understand about Germany is that workers have very strong co-determination rights, particularly where technology is being used to control performance or behavior. And this is a strong legal right where works councils are able to negotiate agreements on those specific uses. So that's one tool that's distinct to Germany and maybe in somewhat weaker in other European contexts. You also have a Works Council Modernization Act in 2021, which gives works councils the right to be informed about and consult over plans to adopt AI. And you have the right to hire company-funded expert to consult on changes where AI is involved. And that's quite important because now you have the growth of some of these basically consultant firms that are working with works councils and spreading best practices across firms and how workers can have kind of productive and well-informed voice in some of these AI decisions. You also have very strong data protection rights in Germany. So Deutsche Telekom, a case that I've been studying since the early 2000s, they started out with a job security agreement between the Works Council and management, where when technology was used to rationalize work or to make work more efficient, first that would be used to shrink outsourcing. So the percent of work that was outsourced was shrinking rapidly over time. And I heard in call centers, it was practically down to none. At the same time, the Works Council launched a project called Perspectives for All Employees in Customer Service, telecom, where they studied how AI and digitalization was currently and in the future potentially going to impact skills and work organization, as well as privacy issues. And this was joint between management, workers at different levels. They came up with a series of action plans, which resulted in works agreements. So these are collective agreements negotiated by works councils. And to give you one example, their digitalization works agreement requires management and the Works Council to sit down and to draw out a digi roadmap of all of the digitalization AI measures planned for the next few years and how that is going to impact employment, jobs, skills, work organization, a whole range of areas, and then to plan jointly what the solution is going to look like. They also have a workforce analytics agreement that places clear restrictions on how the company can use workforce analytics, but also permits and makes it easier for companies to quickly adopt tools that are more supportive of worker training or of improving skills and other ways that are more jointly productive and not just being used to monitor or make top-down decisions. And they developed a manifesto on the ethical use of artificial intelligence, which also has very clear restrictions, as well as a process with an ethics committee made up of management and worker representatives to oversee any complaints, as well as planned AI that may have ethical implications in the workplace. And so here's a summary that I won't go over in detail of their AI ethics manifesto, with some clear prohibitions, as well as a whole range of principles. And here is an example of the restrictions on monitoring speech analytics and workforce management within their agreement. Basically, for individual and performance data, it can only be reported at the group level. That's happened for a long time. And this then has implications for how these monitoring tools are used and the ability to use them to punish or to promote and support workers. And so overall, my findings from looking at this case, from talking to management as well as employee representatives, both sides really felt there were strong mutual gains to this process of co-determination over AI tools with a lot of mutual learning. On the employee side, they came up with a lot of reasonable rules that gave employees control over how they use the AI tools. For example, they could choose whether to use agent assistant tools or not if they thought it was useful in their job. And management said, this is good because they don't feel it's being forced on them, but actually a majority of them have found that it's helpful. And so they have a much more positive attitude about these tools. There's also more data privacy, so a kind of sense of some control over your personal data, which led to more trust. You know that your data cannot be used for certain purposes. Upskilling was kind of baked into this cooperation to think about ways employee skills could be applied to helping the tools really promote a high service quality model. And you also had high pay and job security and flexible scheduling. On the management and company side, there was improved customer service. The management said, our main metric is first call resolution, and that has gone way up since we put these agreements in place, since we're using AI in this more targeted way, and really focusing on making sure that some work is automated, but the work that remains is very high quality and high skilled with well-trained agents who can provide really good answers to customers when they need it. And I always get the question when I present this, in the US, customer service, people have so many bad experiences with it. I think in Deutsche Telekom, they really succeeded in finding a way to use these tools to improve customer service. And at the same time, they were increasing productivity and reducing costs with high labor management cooperation and low conflict. At the same time, I've just been doing interviews over the last few months, and there's a lot of this nice complimenting, empowering stuff going on at Deutsche Telekom, but there's also labor replacing and displacing. So Deutsche Telekom they kind of reached the limit of rationalizing the subcontractors, and now they're downsizing around 1,000 employees per year, which is the works counselors we talked to directly were attributing to a lot of these tools and their increasing efficiency. There's also the use of robotic process automation combined with AI that over time has meant that thousands and thousands of back office jobs across many of these ICT companies have been automated. So data centers in Central and Eastern Europe have been wholesale closed because those workers are not needed anymore. And most recently, I heard that AI-based translation tools mean that the remaining back office work can often be offshored to places like India and Africa. And indeed, that's what Deutsche Telekom was starting to do. It was triggering a new round of negotiations. So conclusions, the effects of AI at work are not a natural feature of the technology. These management choices matter. Worker voice can encourage mutual gains and also benefit customers or service workers, service users. But there's a huge potential for automation and offshoring. So who will benefit and who will bear the costs is certainly shaped by policy and by strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Doellgast. That was wonderful. Let me start with a few questions. We can open up to questions that are put into the chat. So you've been studying the call centers for a long time. And you mentioned how Deutsche Telekom is reducing employment at this, and also in estimates that are done, effects of AI technology on jobs. Contact centers do appear to be kind of at-risk occupations because so many of the tasks can be automated. At the same time, I have spoken with some industry experts who said that because of the rise of e-commerce and so many other processes that are digitalized, there's actually a market expansion in this work because of a greater need for customer service. So I just wanted to get your sense of how you see, if possible, how you see this profession evolving over time. Do you think eventually it will disappear, or do you think there will always be a residual workforce?
Oh, that's a good question. And I've been asked that by journalists a few times recently. There's a lot of interest in how AI is going to affect work. I think in the near term, certainly call center work will not disappear. And not, I think, so one part of the answer is that customer service, you continue to have the need for agents to answer more complicated or questions or related kinds of issues. Companies also benefit from their agents cross-selling and upselling products. And so they have an interest in having people, particularly who are good salespeople, be on the phone with a customer and help them to make decisions around bundles or around new products. So as you say, right, those kinds of roles and jobs are not going to go away, but you do have a lot of peeling off of work, right? So those agents become more efficient, which also means you need fewer of them. Their work becomes more intense, as I pointed out, because they are handling the more complicated work or they're doing the sales pitches, which is more than just answering a call. There's a lot of emotion involved in selling something. And so the job itself is changing and you have lesser demand. I think I talked to some representatives of call center subcontractor employer associations in Germany. And they were saying that a lot of companies are really shifting to outbound marketing because, as you say, this is the area where there's some growth because people have realized that that's where you need the people and you can have a real benefit relative to machines.
Okay, so perhaps some of these jobs will just be transformed into other types of tasks, as many economists predict. So in your presentation, you have the results on how the workers felt about some of the algorithmic management tools that have been implemented. And surprisingly, in some of them, you have 1/3 strongly agreeing, 1/3 strongly disagreeing. Are there any patterns to that in terms of who was responding or the types of firms that they were working in that give an indication of something we can learn from what that means? I'm sort of a little bit more.
Yeah, no, it's something that we're writing papers about right now. So we're digging into these questions of what are the factors associated with these outcomes. Interestingly, we don't see a consistent pattern across employers or even different, well, mostly across employers. Where we do see a difference is connected to how employees are describing the efficacy of unions or the helpfulness of unions and representing them in a range of areas. So Sean O'Brady and Jung-Hoon Kim, who are working with me on that project, are writing a paper right now looking at how really the better outcomes for workers and more positive experiences with AI are very much connected to, in a way, effective worker voice at the company level. So where you really feel like the unions are protecting your privacy and data and representing you to make sure these tools are being used in better ways. You also have better outcomes and you have less worker stress and burnout connected to those tools. So I think there's more evidence that our data supports the positive role of worker voice, even in the US context.
Wonderful. Okay, so here I have a question from an ILO colleague, Fabiola Mieres, who asks, let's see, how do unions manage the transition from learning about these tools and training their members? It seems to me that changes are perhaps being introduced faster than dialogue as one concern. And could you elaborate a bit more on the ways in which customers and worker can align with themselves? You had mentioned that in your presentation. It sounds like something that's very promising, but also that could be difficult.
Yeah. So on the first question, I mean, part of this project where we did the survey in the union workplaces, this was in cooperation with the CWA and with Unifor in Canada. And in the US, we did capacity building workshops for union locals across the US and many different telecom firms and bargaining units. And that was focused on presenting some of our data and findings, but also presenting what I just presented to you. What are these tools? How are they being used? What are the possible positive and negative? And then we had discussion groups and strategizing around, okay, well, So what are you seeing in your workplace, and what is working well, and how might you think about a way that you can better steer these tools to improve job quality, or to help them have less of a negative, or more positive impact in the workplace. So that's one thing. I think in Germany you have much more capacity doing what my research team is doing at scale, where you have, as I pointed out, these consultants, and you have, a works council, works agreement prize, and often, like IBM and Deutsche Telekom have won those prizes, and then that gets just shared through Verity or through different research groups. And I'm working with colleagues there who have a project that was really done in consultation with companies, industry, and the ICT and telecom sector, but also with the works councils, and was focusing on both sides and trying to understand how AI could be used for good. As a final example, we just had a conference at Cornell on AI and the future of work, where we had academics presenting their research over 2 days for a special issue of the ILR review. And we had union discussants on the panels of the academics, and then we had academic discussants on union panels on the final day, where there was a lot of exchange and discussion about and strategizing about how unions could respond productively, and in a way that, again, promoted higher quality jobs and better outcomes. There was a second part of that question, though. Remind.
The second part was about, you mentioned about how customers and workers can align themselves.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, this comes from talking to colleagues and unions also who are working in healthcare and education, and thinking about the similarities with call centers. So I had one discussion with a manager in a US company, and they were saying, it's quite hard for us, given all the pressures we're under, to focus on customer service, right? Because we know that it's important kind of in the longer term for our financial health, but in the shorter term, we have to show financial results. We have to show cost cutting, rationalization, all of these things. And so where you have a union pushing for that service quality focus, which was very much the case in these customer service focused industries, I think that does, in a way, force companies to take a longer term view, which has a positive performance outcome, right? That workers are going to be the ones saying, you can't just use AI to just throw it at the problem and have these crappy chatbots that are not really answering customer calls, because we really want them to be happy. And we're on the front line when customers are angry because these tools are not working and solving their problems. We want you to put them in place in a way that actually helps us solve and resolve these issues. And so I think that's a way in which everybody benefits and gains.
Absolutely. Okay, so more of a difficult question. What is your recommendation then for non-unionized workplaces? I mean, is there something, certainly there's things that can be done at the company level, but in terms of regulation or governance, if you're a policymaker, are there certain recommendations that you would make to ensure that there is job quality and that there isn't this deterioration?
Yeah, I think setting up forums for worker voice. There certainly are initiatives. I know Microsoft has been proactive in trying to have their own ethical AI statement at the company level. And I talked to I was on a panel with somebody, a management representative from Microsoft, who was speaking about all of the work that they were doing within their company to try to promote more positive worker voice in these decisions, as well as a kind of ethical approach to AI. So I think the companies can learn from what is happening in union and non-union firms. I'm not trying to argue that unions are the only way that you get to a good outcome. It's just that for a lot of companies, there's so much pressure on the cost focus that having that more organized form of worker voice is often, in a sense, needed to push to kind of create that productive constraint where the managers who want to have the longer term view on these AI investments are, in a sense, forced to discuss it and think about it in the longer run. So, managers at Deutsche Telekom would tell me that I wouldn't necessarily sit down and plan out how I'm going to use these tools. They're coming at us so quickly. There's like these shiny new things and we want to put them in place. But having this kind of process of dialogue through our works agreement, in a sense, forces us in a productive way to think through these steps and to make better decisions. So, but that can also happen voluntarily, right? You can do it in a proactive way.
Yeah, no, you could do it with kind of high engagement workplaces that are discussing these things with their workers. There is the HCI literature on participatory design of systems, because workers are the ones who know the systems the best. And so when these new systems are introduced, if the workers can be involved in designing them, it usually works. It usually works better.
Yeah, no, and that's part of, these 2 points. There's the coalition with the customers, but there's also the real, empirically proven performance benefits from having employee participation and having employees approaching those tools in a more empowered way, where they're not worried they're going to lose their jobs or that they're being intensively monitored for every mistake that's made, where they're given some voice and role individually as well, and how they use the tools and whether they're going to be used to augment their work.
Right. And how important do you think, because a lot of the discussion also in policy turns to skilling, the need for workers to have the skills to work with the systems, to understand these systems, also the need for managers to understand the AI systems. In the context of what you were studying, did you think that was an issue that would have helped? Or do you think that that's maybe not so necessary?
Sorry, repeat that again. So what would have helped? Because
a lot of the discussion on the changing workplace and the effect of AI, a lot of the policy discussion turns to skilling, that we need to improve worker skills.
Okay.
Yes. So, this is obviously a very specific context because of use of the chat bots and the co-pilot assistants. But did you feel in this context that is an issue, that a lack of skills or a need for more skills, at least to understand it, not relevant?
I think these skill questions, here I would refer maybe to my research looking more at game development or some of the higher skilled ICT professions. I certainly think there's a lot around. So for example, the tools can enable designing these call center jobs more broadly, which requires some additional worker skill and experience, even if they're using the tools. So it's a kind of complicated relationship, and there have been a lot of initiatives to try to think about, well, what are the new kinds of skills workers need, and how can AI actually be used to help train them and have kind of more targeted skills. And certainly when it comes to sales, right, this is an area that it can be, like the good sales representative has a lot of intrinsic sorts of skills, but there are also ways that you can learn to be better at that. So it's sort of like the call center area, but in these more ICT programmer, software engineer kinds of occupations, I've heard some really interesting mixed views about how AI is making it, in a sense, easier to just rely on the tool to do some basic programming, but then in the longer run makes it harder for you to solve problems, right? So I was talking to a software engineer at one large US tech firm, and he was, in game development, and he was saying that new recruits coming in from Stanford are using generative AI tools in all their problem sets. So they kind of use them to do programming work. But then when they're confronted with real world problems that you face on the job in doing game development or code fixing, you're not really prepared. to tackle those problems. And so he's seeing this real kind of gap or connection between how people are being educated and how AI is affecting this whole range of skill development areas. So I think this is going to be an important aspect in different ways, but I think it's very much up in the air.
Interesting. We have a question from the chat. There was about numerous aspects of using AI at work and not using it are regulated in the EU's AI Act and in the GDPR. Should developing countries think of the AI Act as the currently most useful blueprint for regulation of AI's use at work, or are there other frameworks that they should refer to when trying to design their own legal frameworks? So this is more of a regulatory question. I don't know if you have something to say on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're within the GDPR and the AI Act, there are a lot of helpful models for particularly around data protection and the use of these tools in more the kind of algorithmic management, labor controlling kind of way. But I was recently talking to a works counselor at a large German kind of manufacturing / tech company. And he said that their management had told them that their AI investments were going to be used to basically gain 30% efficiency gains, which meant, from his perspective, they're going to cut 30% of jobs and restructure work in pretty dramatic ways. And so certainly the telecom case I'm looking at, they've thought about how you can have co-determination to really impact work organization, but that's something that's not included in the GDPR or, from his perspective, in the AI Act. So he said straight up, like, okay, yes, we're, as German Works Council, is very focused on this performance management thing, and we kind of have the rights and the ability to negotiate over that. But we have far fewer rights as well as good models for how we address that potential wave of automation impacts, particularly where it starts to hit some of the higher skilled engineering jobs within our company. And so he was seeing that was going to be a near-term impact. And that's something where I think having some of these more, having unions and works councils more involved in some of these kind of basic decision-making around how those tools are being introduced and what impacts they're having requires legal changes that are more about basically strengthening worker rights to organize and worker voice. So that was a long, windy way to say, in the global South, maybe some of the primary concerns are just sort of basic ones around rights to organize and rights to worker voice, these core freedom of association rights that the ILO has been promoting.
Absolutely. Also, especially when it comes to displacement, you can prioritize redeployment within the organization. If you mentioned about, switching some of these customer service representatives to be sales workers, which is a nice way of ensuring that they don't lose their jobs.
Yeah. So I read an article recently about the Philippines and how they are anticipating a huge jobs apocalypse in the call center BPO sector, but at the same time, they're attracting a lot of jobs for the AI value chain, data coding, content moderation. So I think in many countries, there's probably new value chain jobs that are going to be replacing the old ones that are getting automated. But again, the same kinds of problems and issues around the conditions for that work, and some of the basic issues around worker empowerment and voice, just to have some say in their conditions and to have good pay. Good paying conditions is the kind of crucial issues.
Okay, so one last question. I don't know, did your research at any point look at some of the people who were displaced and lost their jobs and what happened to them?
You know, so I was talking to I was talking to some representatives within the subcontractors, call center subcontractors in Germany, where they had, formally the same rights, but far less ability to exercise them because that sector was either shrinking or moving more toward the marketing area. And they had a lot of downsizing. But I didn't talk to the direct workers downsizing, but it was certainly a main concern of the Works Council. And the recent interviews with Works Counselors at these different telecom and IT firms, they talked a lot about, the focus shifting somewhat to how we can make sure there's downsizing under social conditions. And making sure that was part of their negotiation process, or it was becoming more of a priority because they felt like, well, there's no way we can stop this wave in a sense, or even negotiate around different kinds of uses. It's just, too powerful and too much of a focus of the companies. So, yeah. That in many ways, and that's been the discussion about what's going to happen if there is an AI jobs apocalypse. How can we think of good public policy, as well as how collective bargaining might adjust to make sure that that's happening under social conditions and that there's some adjustment into better sectors. And so that hasn't been an area I've focused on in my research, but I think it will become more important in future years.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think your research really shows, though, how these processes can be managed, the benefits for both businesses and workers when these processes are managed. And how so much more can be done. It's not just something that's just going to happen, but we can actually control it. So thank you so much for joining with us. Really appreciate it. I just wanted to announce to everybody that on November 13th, which is a Wednesday at 4 p.m. Geneva time, we will have Duncan Crabtree Ireland as our guest, and he is the National Executive Director and Chief Negotiator of SAG-AFTRA. So he'll be able to speak a little bit on what the Screen Actors Guild did in terms of negotiating around AI at the workplace. So please stay tuned for the next AI and Work series, and thank you so much.
Thank you for participating in today's AI for Good session. We hope you've learned something new, innovative, and engaging in today's event. We now encourage you to continue the conversation on the live video wall in the neural network. Here you can ask questions, like and comment, share links, complete the poll, connect with interesting profiles, or speak one-on-one using the chat and video function. We invite you to explore the lobby, try the smart matching quiz, visit the virtual exhibits, poster boards, the eShop, and build your personalized AI for Good program. Let's shape the future of AI for Good.
The AI for Good Global Summit, convened by ITU, recognizes the joint responsibility of governments, the private sector, United Nations agencies, academia, and others to ensure AI reaches its full potential while preventing and mitigating harms.
And it's a moment that calls for action. And today I'm calling on each of you to use this summit to help the world to better understand what kinds of regulations, what kinds of guardrails we need to put in place right now. So together, let's make it innovative, let's make it safe, and let's make it responsible for all. Thank you very much. you.